Now for our final award of the ceremony, we're going to have the Distinguished Career Achievement Award. And Committee Chair Donald Crafton from the University of Notre Dame will present the award. And I just want to mention one other thing. He will present the award and summarize the committee's comments. And then Richard Abel will take the stage and talk for a little while to us about his career before we close out the session for today. So, Don.
I too would like to thank a wonderful committee. Not only did this give us the opportunity to give out this award, but it also afforded us lots of wonderful collegial talk time through the wonders of the internet, of course, but it was a great consensus building experience. And those members are Vivian Sobchak, UCLA, Linda Williams, Berkeley, and Ian Kaplan, Stony Brook, and Jan Olsen, Stockholm University. The recipient of the 2014 Distinguished Career Achievement Award is a masterful historian of early French and American cinema, the author or editor of 9 books and dozens of scholarly articles renowned for their meticulous empirical research, critical argumentation, and their teachability. His ongoing publications indefatigably promote to students and specialists in an international arena the promise and excitement of studying early cinema. He also has set an example by involving film archivists in his scholarship, and more recently in exploring the untapped potential of digital repositories, such as the local newspapers of the early 20th century. Of his several books, we may single out those that cumulatively sketch the breadth and depth of French cinema and its influence on American filmmaking and audienceship. French cinema, the first wave, 1915 to 1929, brought to light a richly storied national cinema that was a revelation to readers on both sides of the Atlantic. Among its virtues, it seamlessly integrated avant-garde production into its consideration of mainstream narrative films. The 2-volume French Film Theory and Criticism, 1907 to 1939, a history/anthology, was an exhaustive collection of original texts, most available for the first time in English, that made us aware of the depth of perception and the burning passion of the filmmakers, critics, and aficionados of the pre-World War II years. The focus shifted to the reception of early film in The Cine Goes to Town, French cinema 1896 to 1914, and expanded to international audiences in The Red Rooster Scare, Making Cinema American, both exemplary for their deeply synthetic cultural history. In addition to literary prizes for his books and articles, including from the SCMS, he has won fellowships from the NEH, the Guggenheim, and ACLS. His service to the discipline includes serving as president of the Society for Cinema Studies, 1987 to 89, as well as on numerous committees and editorial boards. As a university administrator, an educator, and a mentor to appreciative graduate students, he has consistently advanced cinema and media studies in academia and society at large. It is very appropriate, therefore, to bestow the Distinguished Career Achievement Award to University of Michigan Emeritus Professor of International Cinema and Media Studies, Richard Abel.
I'm not going to campaign for president again, so you shouldn't have really stood up there. I think that guy you saw there was not quite ready for this close-up. This certainly is an extraordinary, unexpected, and stunning honor. I'm deeply grateful to the committee, Don, Linda, Vivian, Ann, Jan, to those who submitted my nomination, as well as those lobbyists who wrote support letters, to the SCMS Board of Directors' apparent approval, and to the SCMS membership. I'm acutely aware that many other colleagues are equally, if not more, worthy of this honor. But I do hope that I'm far from the last honoree who works primarily on silent cinema. Primarily. As many of you know, I don't fancy myself an exciting speaker, certainly not one who could pull off the kind of off-the-cuff talk that Vivian did with so much flair 2 years ago. But Vivian did make a good suggestion for anyone finding herself or himself in this position. Take a big swig of wine, put yourself in the mood. For me, however, it better not be too big, for who knows what I'll end up saying. So I'm tempted to steal a gesture from Mae Marsh, who invited to speak before a big film screening in Chicago in 1915, was so anxious that she feared she would blurt out, "Hello, I'm here, goodbye." Did I ever dream of standing here before you like this? No. And certainly not when I left home and 6 younger siblings in the Rust Belt of northeastern Ohio to major in forestry and wildlife management at Utah State University. And then found myself unexpectedly blown away by literature and philosophy. And not when, at the University of Southern California for master's and doctoral degrees in comparative literature, my dissertation was on the literary relationship of St. Jean Test and T.S. Eliot. I never once took a film course. And not when, after a few years at Drake University, I began to undergo a process of self-education in film studies with the aid of an AFI Summer Institute, several soon-to-become colleagues at the University of Iowa, a few research trips to European Film Archives, and a fateful revelatory meeting in Paris with Marie Epstein at the Cinémathèque Française. And not when I began to serve rather unprepared, I'm afraid, as president-elect and then president of the Society for Cinema Studies in the 1980s. And not when I began to write about French silent cinema and early French film theory and criticism, and migrated back across the pond to research the first 2 decades of motion pictures in the USA, and then was presumptuous enough to think that I could edit 2 collections on early cinema. And finally, not when I was invited, also unexpectedly, to move to the University of Michigan, wrap up the last stages of starting a new doctoral program, and work with such amazing colleagues and doctoral students, many of them here tonight. You just saw Peter Alaloonis, for instance, and Carol Flynn, and who else? From those experiences, let me share several brief thoughts. To imagine what one will be doing 10 or 20 years from now, especially in this era of interdisciplinarity and multimedia convergence, may be a fool's game. Yet it's increasingly possible to chart a path, as I believe I have, often without being conscious or deliberate about it, a path that links and interrelates one discipline with another, one research area of cinema and media studies with another, and turn that to an advantage. Moreover, Even if one teaches at a college or a university below, even well below a Research One university, one still can succeed as a scholar and teacher. That, of course, can demand persistence, perseverance, thinking outside the box, or asking, what if? Or why? A network of generous colleagues and continuous dialogue, and luck, sometimes lots of luck. And at times, luck certainly has been a lady to me. The time, for instance, when I sent my first big manuscript to Princeton University Press, just as Joanna Hitchcock was searching for film books to publish. The time when I was granted a fellowship to the National Humanities Center, had a crash course in French history studies, and wrote much of This City Goes to Town. The time when I joined half a dozen colleagues at Drake University to establish one of the earliest cultural studies undergraduate programs. The time when, having seen so many archive prints of early French films, I was surprised to find that Pathé Films dominated Nickelodeon programs from at least 1905 to 1908, which led me to rethink how we define cinema in the USA as a national cinema. The moment when realizing that over the years I've become part of a huge network of colleagues studying early cinema and consequently could invite and cajole many of them to write hundreds of entries for the Routledge Encyclopedia. And the opportunity given me at the University of Michigan to create new undergraduate classes in silent cinema, and documentary film from Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as graduate seminars in cinema historiography, the emergence of mass culture in early cinema, and case studies in exhibition. At previous award ceremonies, Linda, Vivian, Dudley, Thomas Ann, and a number of others have spoken eloquently about our expanding field of study as well as our obligations as public intellectuals, and offered trenchant advice to younger scholars. So what the hell else might I add to all of that? Well, begging your indulgence, let me read a few paragraphs from the introduction to a book manuscript, Menus for Movie Land, that I've just completed, which I hope will extend my career a bit longer. So here goes. Oh, no, I need this. In the early 20th century, motion pictures in newspapers constituted highly ephemeral instances of modern industrial culture in the USA. As motion pictures became an increasingly popular, cheap instant amusement, the emerging industry gradually came to realize that it had to do more than promote the circulation of films through a national trade press targeting exhibitors and rental exchanges, that it had to develop efficient, effective means to shape and sustain a mass public through local or regional newspapers. At the same time, newspapers found that movie madness could be exploited to generate advertising revenue and increase circulation. Yes. From 1913 to 1916, the reciprocal and profitable alignment between these trash twins produced what others have called a normative structure of intermedial fusion that blurred the technological, social, and cultural boundaries between the two, literalized, that is. For the cinema historian, the detritus from this alignment has turned into a treasure trove of discursive material on the promotion, exhibition, and reception of the movies, material that still demands examination. Menus for Movie Land assumes that at the turn of the last century, according to Robert E. Park, the newspaper's primary function was to offer menus, or maps, by which its readers could make sense of the complexity of modern urban life and imagine how to order and interpret their own daily lives. That function was crucial to what Charles Taylor terms, quote, the social imaginary, the way a given people imagine their collective social life, unquote. A newspaper, to quote others, looked like an authoritative representation of the social world, streamlined in appearance and displaying clear hierarchy and segmentation, unquote, which worked, as Benedict Anderson earlier argued, quote, to enable groups of people to live together as a community, if not actually, then at least in their imagining, unquote. Among those newspaper menus in the early and mid-teens were formats that mediated the interests of motion picture manufacturers, distributors, local exhibitors, and the rapidly expanding audience of fans. If during this period cinema's institutionalization as a mass entertainment depended on newly standardized practices in film production, distribution, and exhibition, it also just as crucially depended on the emergence of weekly pages and amusement sections, often in Saturday or Sunday editions, as well as daily columns on the movies that encouraged audiences of frequent, regular spectators quite different from those of the drop-in Nickelodeon period. Negotiating among national, regional, and local interests during the industry's transformation, this newspaper discourse arguably played a significant role in shaping audiences' ephemeral experience of moviegoing, the repeated encounters with the fantasy worlds of Movieland, and their attractions to certain stories and stars. Although the parallel should not be overstated, this newspaper discourse on motion pictures offers a prototype of sorts for the far more extensive discourse on a much broader current spectrum of intermedial fusion with the web at its core. Newspapers, an older yet already transformed medium at the time, constituted a discursive arena with their menus of weekly pages and daily columns for companies and publicists in the industry to reach fans of the movies more directly, and vice versa. Not only did those pages and columns provide a regular diet of information and gossip to feed fans' desires and longings, they also seemed to offer fans a forum for giving voice to their pleasures and displeasures, questions and anxieties. However diverse were their menus and changing menu items, newspapers served them as invaluable nodal points of interconnectivity that were as crucial as monthly fan magazines, if not more so, in creating and sustaining the emerging public space of American film culture. This popular film culture slightly predates Lindsay's The Art of the Moving Picture and Munsterberg's The Photoplay, a psychological study, and likely provoked the initial stirrings of an academic film culture at Columbia University. Equally significant, some of the film review discourse broaches concepts that soon would be elaborated and eventually contributed to what has become the discipline of cinema studies. Extending my recent work and that of other early cinema historians, menus for Movieland addresses several related questions. To what extent did those in the industry seek to act as gatekeepers by exerting some measure of control over what should be included and highlighted in this newspaper discourse? For the readers/spectators, they increasingly wish to be middle class and native white, to invoke the U.S. Census term at the time. And how did their promotional strategies change as cinema programs came to include not only single reel films, but also serials as well as feature-length films? To what degree, by contrast, did newspapers and exhibitors also attempt to control this discourse for whom they assumed were their readers/spectators? And how did their efforts shift with changes in cinema programs? To what degree, then, was film promotion a national phenomenon, while allowing for a limited number of niche markets that tended to produce a more or less homogeneous film culture? Or was promotion just as often local or regional, assuming that a newspaper's kind of reading field could differ from one city to another as well as be specific to certain social groups, and with the result that film culture and the alleged interest of actual moviegoers was heterogeneous, or relatively so. Finally, given that much of this newspaper discourse was written and or edited by women, to what extent did it tend to target women readers / spectators? And could these writers or editors, along with other women finding all kinds of professional work in the new industry, be taken as influential figures of the American New Woman? To sum up, whatever advances may come from this and other research in the future, let these words of historian Arlette Farge be our motto, quote, "We write history not just to tell it, but to anchor a departed past to our words and bring about an exchange among the living," unquote. In closing, as we finally move towards the reception, let me toast not only the other award winners and all of you out there, but also my longtime partner, Barbara Hodgson, who has done so much to shape my writing, who could not join me here today, and who is busy writing her own 6th book, this one on a set of archival materials from recent Shakespeare productions. So thank you so very, very much.